Hi YouTube, Darth here. Today's Yes or No is all about the MPX, a new personal defense weapon that features in the Dragon's Teeth expansion for Battlefield 4. I've been spending some time with this weapon since the launch of Dragon's Teeth, and I had been using it in the CTE as well. And very little has changed from the community test environment. It's a PDW with some unique characteristics that struck me, often in the face and repeatedly from other players. But before I get too far in, should you use this weapon? Yes or no? Yes, and here's the list of positives that make this gun a good choice. It does great damage. This weapon isn't the fastest killer among the PDWs, as that honor remains with the AS Val, but its damage model of 27 max and 13 min makes it an interesting contender for reasons I'll get into later. While not the fastest PDW, at 850 rounds per minute, the MPX is a faster firing than usual weapon. This RPM means that it's nicely controllable and drops quite a bit of ammo on the target. As a PDW, this weapon naturally has great hipfire. It's not the best hipfire PDW, but it can be augmented with several attachments to make it a hipfire machine. The MPX recoil pattern is nearly equal in all directions. This means that the weapon predictably blossoms each time you fire it. Combined with the controllable RPM, this makes getting bullets on target pretty frustration-free. This weapon has wonderful reload times. The MPX has a bullet in the chamber reload time of 2.1 seconds. This is, again, not the best in class for a PDW, but is on the faster side for Battlefield 4. The empty reload of 2.7 seconds is not bad either. So, as you can see, this gun has a lot of good stats that aren't best in class, but they do add up into a lot of positives that work well together. And as always, there's some bad to swallow with the good, so here's the negatives about the MPX. The gun's magazine size is pretty mediocre. This weapon fires pretty fast, and that means that you're going to go through bullets pretty quickly. At only 25 rounds per magazine, the MPX is tied for the second to last in the PDWs for ammo count. The MPX has a higher than usual spread per shot increase accuracy penalty. What this means is that the longer you hold down the trigger, the more likely your shot is going to land outside where you're aiming. While it's not the worst in the game, the spread per shot increase of the MPX certainly makes it a weapon with which you don't want to hold down the trigger. And lastly, it's a PDW. Yeah, so the biggest attraction from the MPX is the fact that it's limited to the engineer class. There were a lot of times when I was playing with this weapon that I was having to drag myself to health kits or beg for sensors, tugs, or ammo. Especially in the close-range battles that this weapon excels, you'll have a lot of infantry action for which engineers are not particularly well suited. That's really it for the negatives. I could mention that it has a bullet velocity of only 340 meters per second, but that's not strange for a PDW. As you can see, this weapon has a lopsided amount of positives about it and not a whole lot of detractions. And, in looking at this weapon, all those not-so-great things are really negated by the weapon's positives or by playing smart. The fact that the weapon frequently runs out of ammo in a sustained firefight is nicely covered by the fact that it reloads quickly. The high spread per shot increase can also be negated by attachments and tactics, both of which I will talk about in a moment. Ultimately, this is a weapon that's balanced quite nicely in your favor for both close and medium range fights, and it offers quite a lot of versatility that most PDWs do not. The MPX has one of the most predictable recoil patterns of the personal defense weapons. It has a recoil pattern that is split almost identically in every direction. It has a 0.3 left and a 0.3 right recoil and a 0.36 up. What this means is that the recoil pattern for this weapon will travel upwards slightly and blossom the longer you fire the weapon. Ultimately, this will resemble a larger and larger V the longer you fire the weapon. So let's look at simply countering the direction of the recoil. This one's pretty easy as you simply pull downwards on your mouse while firing. That'll keep your crosshair on target, but you're going to get a pretty big bloom on your bullets if you don't counter the spread per shot increase. Because of the weapon's higher spread per shot increase, you're going to want to tap or burst fire this weapon. At close range, I find that letting up every 5 to 6 shots works best. If you're trying to hit a target while aiming down sights and that target is at range, you're going to want to microburst this weapon. Microburst is firing as few rounds per burst as possible, generally about 1 to 3, while shooting at your target. Remember that firing in bursts works best with attachments that complement this behavior, but I'll talk all about attachments later. Just know that if you're using the MPX at range, the side-to-side recoil in combination with the spread increase will disable your ability to hit range targets if you fire for too long. Let's talk tactics for using the MPX. First, I want to talk about a way of offsetting the MPX's range limitations. The MPX only has a bullet velocity of 340 meters per second, the minimum damage of 13 means you're putting 8 or 9 bullets on your target at max range, and PDWs typically have the lowest maximum ranges. As an engineer, I offset this difficulty by rocket sniping targets that are at range. I prefer the straw or the RPG, but you might find yourself preferring the small. It's all about what you're most comfortable using. But at close and medium range, the MPX excels quite nicely. At close range, you're going to always want to hipfire the MPX. As a PDW, it's naturally got great hipfire, and the damage model of 27 at ranges closer than 12.5 meters combined with a high rate of fire means you kill unarmored enemies on normal in only 4 bullets. This is important to note as the CZ3A1, SR2, and AS Val are the only other PDWs that have faster time to kill at this range. However, the MPX maximum damage reaches up to 50% further than those weapons. By using some trend data on the weapon, we find that the MPX is a 4-shot kill to the chest out to 15 meters, whereas the others stop at 8 and 12 meters. At medium range, the MPX continues to do pretty well, but you're going to need to make use of that high fire rate and microbursting to down your target. Remember, you're using a PDW, so that lower bullet velocity means you're leading your target if they're moving. That's pretty typical stuff though. But all of this is about firing the weapon, so how did I play with it otherwise? For the most part, I found myself able to adapt to almost any situation with this weapon. I think for obvious reasons, I tended to stay away from wide open stretches of maps I was on. The MPX doesn't perform at long range, so I recommend playing to areas where its strengths lie. You can play aggressively in close quarters thanks to its high rate of fire, and at medium range you can stop ADS and have some pretty decent accuracy thanks to microburst. So as long as you're able to stick to cover, the MPX performs really well, even when you're surprised by enemies. Let's look at the best attachments for the MPX. When I first started getting unlocks and attachments for the MPX, most of the early unlocks favor running this weapon as a purely hipfire machine. You unlock the RDS, Ergo Grip, and Laser as the first few unlocks in the weapon's progression, so it's not surprising that a lot of players simply stop here and don't take the weapon any further. When I was looking up the top loadouts among the leaderboards at BF4 stats, it wasn't surprising to see this was the most common setup. But there was also a very high number of players using the stubby grip with this weapon. But let's think about this weapon when it's naked. The hipfire is already pretty good, its upward recoil is middle of the road, and its long range performance is pretty meh. So I actually broke with the pack on this weapon and on some key points. For the optic, I went with the Cobra RDS. Most of the time I've been going with the more open Coyote, but hipfire on this weapon is good enough that the Cobra just feels better at ranges approaching mid. Since this is a close to mid weapon and 90% of players were using this in their MPX setup, it shouldn't come as any shock that I'm recommending an RDS here. Pick your personal preference, but I really don't think there's another sensible choice on this PDW. My secondary of choice was the Laser. Again, this is a no-brainer for this weapon. It's got great hipfire, so augment that with a non-choice. Turn off the Laser when you're attacking mid-range so you don't give away your position. There are plenty of weapons that are still better than the MPX at mid-range, so you don't want a duel. The barrel was a bit of a contention between players, but I ended up going with the Flash Hider. On a weapon that's good at close range, I usually prefer to run the silencer because it fits my aggressive style. But the bullet velocity on the MPX drops to 180 meters per second when you silence it, meaning you could almost walk your bullets to your target in the same amount of time. Plus, you've got what is already a pretty good weapon at close range, so if enemies come looking for you, it's not really a problem since you can usually draw on them faster because of the hipfire. Finally, the underbarrel attachment switched while I was using this weapon. I started off with the Ergo Grip and transitioned to the Angled Grip. And it really depends on what you want to do with this gun, but the Angled Grip gives the MPX that great all-around ability to deal with enemies. You've already got good hipfire modified to great hipfire with a laser, putting on an Ergo Grip just seems like overkill. The Angled Grip, since it decreases that first shot recoil modifier, when combined with microbursting the MPX, makes a real threat at medium range. Playing with the MPX like this reminds me a lot of the AK-971 with the Angled Grip. It just feels right, and I was very comfortable with the transition to this weapon. So there's definitely two playstyles out there that you can focus on with this weapon. I've decided to make it a better weapon for all situations with my layout. However, if you want to do nothing but stay CQB and hipfire this weapon, then maybe the RDS, Laser, Ergo, Suppressor combination is the one for you. But I found this weapon to be much more capable with that Angled Grip setup. So it really depends on what you want to do with this weapon, but the MPX is a great close to medium range weapon. You should definitely try out this weapon if you're interested in using a PDW for the Engineer class. It's one of the few PDWs I would ever consider using instead of a carbine, and it has some great positives in its corner. The MPX suits an aggressive style of play as it's not the best medium range weapon and it falls apart at long range. So if you're an aggressive engineer, this will probably suit you nicely. If you love hipfire, there are modifications you can make to this weapon to turn it into one of the best hipfire weapons in the game. But whatever you do, the answer is a definite yes, you should use this weapon. If you find yourself liking the MPX and think you can control even faster weapons, you might want to try other PDWs like the CZ3A1 or even the AS Val. If you're not a big fan of the MPX or the aggressive playstyle, you might want to try a PDW suited for more mid-range play like the PP2000. But a definite yes on trying out the MPX, as it's easily my favorite PDW to date. That's it for this episode of Yes or No. If you found this video helpful or insightful, please leave it a like. If you'd like to see more Battlefield 4 videos, consider subscribing to my channel. If there's a weapon you'd like to see me review in a future episode of Yes or No, please mention it in the comments below. Thanks for watching YouTube, and I'll see you next time.